Welcome. Hello, everybody. Richard, how you doing? Thanks for joining. Right, so welcome back to Hedge History. This is episode 2. Tonight I'm going to actually talk about moon water. Um, I might not be popular after the show, but oh well, that's how things go, I suppose. Um, Now, I just want to actually preface this whole thing by making a couple of things clear. So, first of all, I am completely in favor of taking old practices and adapting them to or for a modern life. That's how living traditions actually survive. They adapt, right? My issue is not that moon water has been modernized. My issue is that modernization of this specific practice has gone completely off the tracks. To the point where what's being called moon water online barely even resembles what the practice actually is. Well, in traditional and folk witchcraft, anyway. And I want to also say, just make it clear that I know every witch practices a little differently, and I'm not here to tell you there's one single correct way to do anything in this craft. But there are very particular load-bearing elements of this practice that have seem to have like quietly disappeared from the modern version. And so tonight I just want to focus specifically on what's missing and why I think it matters. Luna, hello Luna. Okay, all right. I'm gonna you can watch it afterwards. It gets recorded, so that's all right. But have a good one. Cheers. All right, so let's talk about what this is what's actually going on here anyway. All right. So in traditional folk witchcraft, making moon water is not a matter of putting a jar on a windowsill. It's a physical, deliberate outdoor act, and it traditionally happens like this. You go outside during the night of the full moon after it has rained. Notice both of those conditions already. It has to be the full moon and it has to be after rainfall, right? You're not filling a container from your tap and carrying it outside. You're going out into the world. I know it's scary. Go out into the world to find water that has arrived there naturally, right? Now, traditionally, this meant going into a forest or out into the land itself and looking for some kind of natural impression that has collected rainwater. This could be like a concave hollow in a rock, a depression in a fallen log, a bowl-shaped top of a tree stump, anything in the landscape that has caught and held rainwater on its own. And the water has to be still. So another condition, water has to be still. This is important. It can't be moving water from a stream or a river because moving water won't hold a clear reflection. And a clear reflection is a big part of the whole thing, right? So anyway, so once you've found your still water, you then position yourself so that you can see the full moon reflected on its surface. Now, you might have to get into some weird angular like shapes and contortions and everything else, but it has to reflect in on the surface of the water. This is where you're really doing the work because you don't just let the moonlight passively fall on the water and call it done. You draw the moon down into the water, which is what makes it moon water, right? So I am going to be doing an episode specifically about drawing down the moon, but for now, just understand that drawing down the moon is an active physical and magical act, right? You are pulling the reflection, the light, the actual moon, the presence, the power, the essence of the moon out of the sky and into that water deliberately. It is not the same thing as moonlight simply touching a surface. There's a difference between light falling on something and something being drawn into it. And that difference is the entire heart of this practice. Because of this, you need to actually be able to see the moon's reflection in the water in order to do the working. If it's cloudy, if there's an obstruction, you can't, a tree in the way or something like that, If you can't see the moon on the water surface, the working doesn't happen. Full stop, no ifs or buts. So once the moon has been drawn down, the water is collected, right? And then the exact method of collection actually varies from witch to witch. It's usually transferred to some sort of vessel in a particular manner, but there is very commonly some kind of chant or spoken words or something like that that accompanies the collection itself. So now let's pull this into kind of a modern context, right? Because as I said, you kind of have to go into a wood or a forest. But if you live in the concrete jungle in a city, all right, you're probably not going to have a forest nearby. You might have a park or something like that, but in those really dense cities where there's just no park nearby, you just can't get anywhere. That's just as an argument, just for argument's sake, you cannot get to a forest or a park or anything natural, right? And this is where the adapt, don't abandon principle actually applies very well. So in modern practice, instead of going into the woods to find a stump or a rock hollow, what you would do is you would use impressions found in something like the pavement. It could be a pothole, it could be a divot in concrete, any small natural collection point where rainwater has pooled on its own after a storm. So the principle stays exactly the same. You need natural rainwater held still in a naturally occurring collection point where you can see the moon reflected clearly enough to draw it down. The setting changes, but the mechanism does not. Hello, Psycat and Alexis. Thanks for joining. Right, hope you're enjoying this so far. Um, all right, so that's kind of bringing the whole thing into a modern context. This is kind of modernization I'm talking about. It preserves every essential element of the practice while adjusting for where you actually live. Okay, now, if you want to actually read about or see this method documented, I'm actually going to point you to Jake Richards' book, Backwards Witchcraft, Appalachian Witchcraft. Now, what he talks about something in here called stump water. So this isn't exactly moon water, but the process is very, very similar. I just want to read that to you very quickly. It has to be collected on a full moon while the moon is reflecting in the water with a silver ladle dipped straight down into it. You must walk backward to the stump, and you have to be silent from the moment you leave your abode until you return. So very specific rituals involved here. Let's say it's called, they call it stump water in their tradition, possibly because it's a different tradition, possibly because it's not actually drawing down the moon into the water. It's stump water, it's used for a particular purpose, right? But it's still, during the full moon, the water is collected in a stump in a tree where it's rainwater therefore, and it's still, it's not running water, and you collect it in a certain way. In this particular tradition, it's collection with a silver ladle, okay? And you walk backwards, you don't say anything, etc., etc. So all these little rituals that go along with it, depending on tradition. All right. Now, so let's actually talk about what's actually circulating online. This modern version of what we're actually talking about. Because I think laying the traditional method out first makes it kind of obvious where things have drifted. So I can't in learning good stuff. I like it when you learn. I like it when I learn. I like it when you learn. So that's good. All right. So the most common modern version goes something like this, right? So you take tap water, you put it into a mason jar, you place it outside on a balcony or windowsill during the full moon, sometimes with a crystal set next to it, or even dropped directly into it. And I just want to walk through piece by piece of what's missing. So, firstly, the water. Tap water is processed, treated, municipal water. It has not arrived naturally in the landscape. It hasn't fallen as rain and pooled in a natural hollow. That's one of the two core conditions of the traditional method. Natural water, specifically that which is not moving, a la rainwater. Okay, a mason jar of tap water is not that, no matter how nice it looks in a photo. Secondly, the container itself removes the reflection dynamic entirely. Traditionally, you need to see the moon reflected in the water's surface in order to draw it down into the water. The mason jar sitting under the moon isn't functioning as a reflective surface you're actively drawing anything into. It's just a jar of water sitting outside. There's no active pull happening. There's no working being performed. It's exposure, not invocation. At this point, you might as well go and get water from your local swimming pool after a full moon night. That's really what is happening there, okay? And this brings me to a claim I see constantly online, which is that you don't even need to actually see the moon. That it can be cloudy or overcast, whatever, the water will still work. I want to be very direct, right? This is not how this practice functions traditionally or in a modern context, or at least it shouldn't. The entire mechanism depends on seeing the moon's reflection and drawing it down. If you can't see it, you cannot draw it down. Simple. Saying otherwise isn't an adaptation of the practice, it's the removal of the practice's actual working mechanism while keeping the name. Okay? And it gets even further removed from there because I've also seen people suggest you don't even need to put the water outside at all. That because it's physically the night of the full moon, any water anywhere counts as moon water, indoors or out, seen or unseen. And I have to say, if that logic holds, then the water sitting in your toilet cistern during a full moon is technically moon water, right? It meets every single condition of that argument. It's water, it exists during a full moon, nothing else is required apparently. If a definition of a practice can be stretched to include your toilet tank, the definition has stopped meaning anything at all. All right. So, while we're clearing things up though, I want to address something else that gets conflated with moon water constantly, which is eclipse water. I've seen people market eclipse water as a more powerful version of moon water, and I want to be clear, it's not moon water at all. And here's why. I think you already can gather why. But the entire mechanism we've spent this whole episode describing depends on the light of the moon being drawn down into the water. During an eclipse, whether we're talking about a lunar eclipse, where the moon passes into the Earth's shadow, or the broader eclipse period generally, the moon's light is either obscured or fundamentally altered in a way that removes the very thing the whole practice is built around. There is no clear moonlight being reflected and drawn down during an eclipse the way there is on a normal full moon night. Without that light, you don't have moon water. You might have water collected during an astrologically significant event, and that may have its own value and its own correspondences worth exploring separately. But calling it moon water misunderstands what moon water actually is and how it's made. So, just another thing quickly on the crystal question. Since it comes up so often alongside moon water. Now, some practitioners like to place a stone next to their water or directly in it to add a specific correspondence to the working, right? Setting a stone beside the container is generally fine, although it's still not moon water. But putting certain stones directly into water is not fine at all. And this matters for actual physical safety, not tradition. Selenite, for example, is a soft water-soluble mineral. It will begin to dissolve and break down in water over time, clouding it and degrading the stone. Malachite contains copper compounds and can leach toxic substances into water it's soaking in. Pyrite can react with water and begin to oxidize, releasing sulfur compounds. Stones with lepidolite contain lithium. The general rule serious practitioners follow is research a stone's hardness and mineral composition before it ever goes directly into water you intend to use on your body or in ritual. And when in doubt, keep the stone next to the vessel rather than inside it, right? If you're going to do that at all. I mention this because although you wouldn't want to drink moon water, considering where it came from, a lot of people doing their modern thing do drink it. And if you've added certain stones to it, you could end up poisoning yourself. So bear that in mind. Now, last thing I want to cover, what is this water actually used for traditionally? Moon water properly made is generally associated with lunar working specifically. Things like dream work, placing a bit under your pillow or near your bed or to encourage or influence dreaming. You can use it in scrying practices where the water itself might serve as a scrying medium. Using that as an extension to travel perhaps, or incorporating it into filters, traditional charm mixtures built for those same lunar purposes, dreaming, intuition, vision work, etc., etc. I want to repeat that this water is not for drinking. This is not a beverage. It's collected from rain, which is fine by itself, but from natural outdoor sources, sometimes stagnant, sometimes sitting in a stump or a pavement hollow for who knows who knows how long. It's used externally, ritually, magically, not consumed. Okay, that should go without saying, but given how casually this gets treated online, I think it's worth saying plainly. All right. So that's moon water, the way it's actually built in folk practice. Natural rainwater, a still natural impression, the moon seen and drawn down into its reflection, collected with intention, often with a chant, and used for very specific lunar purposes afterward. Uh, Not a mason jar on a balcony, not tap water, not something you can make with blinds closed on a cloudy night. All right. As I mentioned, I will get into drawing down the moon itself in a future episode because I've got a feeling, you know, somebody listening to this is probably going, "What do you mean drawing down the moon?" Very important ritual within witchcraft, but again, haven't seen that mentioned at all for a very, very long time. So probably one of those other things that have kind of been swept under the rug. And I don't want to try and bring all of this back because witchcraft really is just dissolving into thin air, it seems. But anyway, until then, I'd love to hear in the chat or in the comments after this live if any of you have grown up with a version of this practice or have your own regional variation of collecting water this way. Let's just see. Luna said, met a teacher last year who was running 3 workshops, so I went along to see. She advised us that there is absolutely no need to even remove your crystals from your cupboards on full moon. Apparently, they just automatically charge in cupboard. I won't be doing more of a class. This is the problem is that you know, even like for instance, I'm saying if you want to make moon water, you have to go out on a full moon night, after or during a storm or just rain in general, find a place where it's been collected. And I can already hear people saying, yeah, but what if it hasn't rained? Then you don't get moon water. You wait until it's rained. No, we can't just put tap water into a bottle. It's more convenient. It's got nothing to do with convenience. It's got to do with witchcraft, actually physically doing things. Being a witch, not a convenience store. So, anyway, I don't know. There's just so much that just is just disappearing nowadays. I was just said, imagine filling a mason jar with water, forgetting it, and the next day it becomes a magnifying glass when the sun rises and it burns down your house. Honestly, I have actually seen people mention that. Because one of the reasons you actually bring it in before, because what people do, they kind of leave it outside overnight and they take it in before the sun comes up. Because if the sun comes up, it spoils it because becomes sun water, not moon water anymore, right? And people have actually said make sure you bring it in because it can actually burn your house down, burn something, because the sun comes through and acts like a magnifying glass. So I know you're joking there, but people actually have that problem. So yep. Anyway, all right. So that brings us to the end of today. Next week, I'm actually going to have a look at the pillars of Cornwall, which I thought was quite interesting. What I'm trying to do is kind of do a practice and then do a person in history and kind of alternate each week. So it's going to be quite interesting. We're going to do Pillars of Cornwall. We're going to do have a look at Isabel Gaudi. We'll have a look at Robert Cochrane, Doreen Valiente, all of these people from traditional witchcraft, folk witchcraft, all the history and everything else that brought us into the modern movements. I'm going to have a look at practices. I'm going to look at well, what I've got anyway. There's some general questions that tend to come up about which I'll do 2 weeks from now, like is witchcraft a religion? Do all witches do magic? Do all witches work with spirits? You know, all of those kind of questions because I've seen those come up a lot lately. And people have some very serious opinions about them. But we'll see. And then I want to do Drawing Down the Moon. I want to do a scrying episode. I'm going to do a one on knot magic and cord magic. And then I want to do one on Witch's Ladder as well. So that's going to be fun. All right. Got lots to do. So this is I'm enjoying this. Right, so thank you for joining, thank you for watching, thank you for being in the chat, thank you, Psycat. All right, and I'll see you next time. Well, the next live is going to be on Sunday, so I'll see you there. Have a good one, and have a good Friday, Saturday, weekend, etc. Cheerio for now. Bye bye.